Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Rutenbeck. I'm the Dean of the School of Communication, representing the Expert Identification Subcommittee of the RISE Task Force. And I'm so happy to see all of you here and happy to be introducing Amy Wendover from the Cleveland Clinic. Just a bit of context before I introduce Amy. As you might imagine, when we've envisioned the RISE project, it's hard to think about other kinds of organizations or institutions that have a lot in common with higher ed if you're trying to look outside of higher ed. And the Cleveland Clinic rose early on a number of people's radar about the clear connections between their mission and vision and the work that they do and what we do. So with that in mind, one of the things that we will press for today is drawing those direct connections between Cleveland Clinic practices and what we might consider. So let me introduce Amy Wendover, who is clinical psychologist and director of curriculum at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Excellence in Healthcare Communication in the Office of Patient Experience. She is also an assistant professor of medicine at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine at Case Western Reserve University. Most recently, Dr. Wendover has developed the REDE model of healthcare communication and an intensive experiential relationship-centered training program to improve communication and professional development for Cleveland Clinic staff. Cleveland Clinic is consistently ranked as one of the top hospitals nationwide by U.S. News and World Report, in large part due to its patient-centered efforts. Dr. Wendover earned her PhD from Kent State University and completed health psychology postdoctoral fellowships at Akron General Medical Center and the Cleveland Clinic. Please welcome Amy Wendover.
Thank you, everyone, for such a warm welcome. Been able to tour the campus and see what a beautiful campus and meet a lot of wonderful people here already. So it's a real pleasure to be here today. You know, as I look out at all of you in light of what has recently happened in France, I would like, if you would excuse me, to just ask all of us to take 1 minute of silence to honor those that are really close and dealing with that tragedy there. And Beirut, and Russia. I mean, all over the countries, or the world, we are faced with tragedy. So I don't have a watch on me. Would you be willing to time that for us? Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, well, as Jeff had said, I'm a clinical health psychologist, and I directed the communication skills training in the Lerner College of Medicine of Case Western Reserve for about 10 years before being asked to join the Office of Patient Experience. And that was in order to help develop physicians to become facilitators, to develop faculty and communication in the area of curriculum in the area of communication. I'll get over my stumbling in a minute. Before we begin, I want to share with you a little bit about the history of the Cleveland Clinic and how we came to have a mantra called Patients First. Then we're going to talk about how we built a framework for improving patient experience and sustaining these efforts. And then I'm going to focus in on two large initiatives that have had significant impact across our institution: the Cleveland Clinic Experience and the REDE model, or what we call Ready to Communicate, Foundations of Healthcare Communication. So to start with the history, Cleveland Clinic was founded back in 1921. 4 physicians who actually worked together in World War I, setting up military hospitals near the front lines, which later became known as MASH units, really appreciated the way the military would foster a sense of teamwork, collaboration, and shared knowledge and resources. They worked hard to teach people how to act as a unit. And so, in coming back to Cleveland after the war, these 4 physicians decided they would set up one of the first group practices in medicine based on those principles. And the mission was to care for patients, care for the sick, to investigate their problems, and to educate those who serve. And that mission really holds true today. William Lauer, one of the founding fathers, highlights how we really put patients at the center from the very beginning, saying a patient is the most important person in the institution. It's our job to satisfy them. Well, today, we are a not-for-profit academic medical center with over 120 different specialties and subspecialties. It's physician-led, and all of our staff are salaried with 1-year contracts, renewable following an annual performance review. We have 44,000 caregivers. 3,000 of those comprise our physicians and our scientists. We have an additional 1,800 or so clinical trainees at any one time. All of these to serve almost 6 million patient visits a year and over 155,000 inpatient admissions a year. So if I stop right there, you might think, wow, we're getting it right. That culture of service seems to have really carried us through and done well for us, right? Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot more to this story. So Cleveland Clinic became known as a hospital that was established for physicians, or by physicians, for physicians. It became the place that you would go for technical expertise, but you wouldn't dare go there and expect warmth or compassion or even good bedside manner. One went so far as to call staff mean and vindictive. Yeah, how many of you would want to send your loved ones there, right? Yeah. So we had some work to do. In 2004, when Delos Toby Cosgrove took the helm as CEO, he immediately went about reawakening Cleveland Clinic's mission and values: quality, innovation, teamwork, service, compassion, and integrity. The way he did it most effectively was by consolidating all of that down to one clear, succinct mantra: patients first. Patients first would become our guiding star of sorts that would lead all of our patient experience efforts and help us align around the patient. So he thought he would just start small. He decided to reorganize all of the departments of across the institution. Yeah. So we went from Department of Medicine, Department of Surgery, Department of whatever provider type you want to name, to orienting them around the patients. So they were organized around organ systems and disease areas. What did this do for us? Well, it allowed a patient with diabetes to go to one place to get their assessment and evaluation, to see the endocrinologist, to meet with the dietitian and physical therapist, or the psychologist for health behavior change. All that and more under one roof. Interestingly, these integrated service units brought us back to the original intention of the founding fathers, right? Sharing knowledge and resources, collaborating, and teamwork. We then decided, well, I think we need to listen to our patients here. And so we began to ask them in multiple ways, focus groups and advisory councils, surveys, what matters most to you? And we began readily implementing as many changes as we could. We started by providing an environment that was supportive of healthy habits, going smoke-free, eliminating all the trans fats in the cafeteria. That didn't go over so well. We also employed therapy dogs, healing services like Reiki and massage, increasing the amount of spaces with natural light and with art so that patients could come and feel soothed as best they can as they're trying to heal or deal with very challenging problems. We decided to redesign the gowns, the hospital gowns, making them more comfortable, a little less revealing. Yeah, thank you. That's right. Yeah, that was a big one. Improving access to medical records, improving the up-to-date nature of information given to patients on the inpatient side. What's the question they all wanted to know? When am I going to be discharged? Being able to answer that as best they could. Probably one of the more popular rollouts was our Red Coats initiative, where volunteers would don these red coats and would be positioned at all the high access points in the hospital. So the minute somebody walks in, they are greeted with a warm smile and a handshake, and they are able to provide assistance to patients as to where to go and what they need. Last but certainly not least, we eliminated all visiting hours. We recognized family are vital in the healing process, and we wanted to provide the best access possible. So here we are again, thinking, hey, we're doing all right. We're making some headway. And in 2006, Dr. Cosgrove was invited to speak at the Harvard Business School. Now, this was a long day, 2 sessions, and he was asked to discuss some different case studies. And the last student of the day raised her hand, and it was about mitral valve surgery. And Dr. Cosgrove was thinking, oh, beautiful. That's my area of expertise. I'm going to knock this one out of the park, head on home, leave them on a great note. Yeah. Then she spoke. And she said, my father needed mitral valve surgery, and we knew that the Cleveland Clinic had excellent results. But we didn't go to you because we heard that you had no empathy. I'm pretty sure you could have heard a pin drop. This was televised nationally, of course. And then she said, Dr. Cosgrove, do you teach empathy at the Cleveland Clinic? Starting to realize we're missing something. We haven't quite got it yet. 10 days later, he's in Saudi Arabia at inauguration of a new hospital. King Fahd is there with other dignitaries, and the president is speaking at length in the desert sun about healing the mind and body and spirit. And again, as Dr. Cosgrove relays his story, he says, honestly, I was just thinking, when are they going to get to the good stuff? What about technical expertise, surgical excellence? When all of a sudden, out of the corner of his eye, he saw King Fahd. Tears streaming down his face at the joy of imagining all of his people being able to come to a hospital that was going to treat not just the physical body, but also the mind and the heart, the spiritual and the soul of a person. It was then that we really realized we had lost our call. We had lost that sense of what caring for others meant. Now, in all fairness, Dr. Cosgrove, when he was training, and many of the other highly skilled physicians at the time, had experiences with surgery and procedures that were very new. Heart surgery, in particular, was in its infancy. More people were dying than living from that surgery. And he found that if he cut just so, and if he sewed just right, more people lived than died. And so naturally, he devoted all day, every day, to the pursuit of technical excellence, becoming the best technician, the best surgeon he could, because he wanted to keep people alive. Unfortunately, the very thing that called him into medicine, the very thing that calls all of us, most of us, into healthcare, caring for others, fell to the wayside. All right, so he flew home from Saudi Arabia, and he decided to create a new position at the Cleveland Clinic, one that had never been created at any hospital ever before. Chief Experience Officer, CXO. This became a C-suite executive who had direct reporting to the CEO, and Dr. Cosgrove continued to own and message patient experience. But the CXO was able to oversee the day-to-day management and the operationalization of patient experience efforts. In order to operationalize everything and develop a framework for patient experience, we kind of needed to define what it was. Not as easy as one might think, and I think something that many of you may be struggling with here too. Because patients, yeah, they're customers, but we can't always make them happy. Patient experience can't all be about making patients happy. In fact, sometimes it's just not possible. We have to balance out safety, quality, along with engagement and high value. So it really wasn't about making patients happy. We decided it really needed to be about how we provided care. Now, and of course, we did find out that high quality means not just technical precision, but compassion as well. From there, we formalized the framework further, establishing the 3 Ps of people, process, and patients, and recognizing that we needed to really look at the entire continuum, all of the touch points that patients are going to have with the Cleveland Clinic, from their first perceptions to before they obtain care, to when they are an actual patient, to after their follow-up care. And throughout all of this, it was important to focus on, are our people really getting it? Is the patient-centric culture first and foremost in our minds? Do we have tactics or strategies that people can use to get better and to continually improve the patient experience? Is there enough data available and the right kinds of data available to drive these efforts? And patients, they're part of it too. Partnering engaged patients needing to have realistic expectations. So the Office of Patient Experience developed teams that evolved around these 3 Ps. And these are just a snapshot of some of them. All right, so again, we're thinking we're doing pretty good. And in 2006, Dr. Merlino, Jim Merlino, he was our Chief Experience Officer at the time, came into work. And it was interesting because he saw that there was this big puddle of water on the floor and no yellow sign. And people were navigating it okay, they were out of harm's way. Not one person, though, took the time to clean it up. No one saw it as their job to clean up the mess. That's just one illustration of many that made us realize that we needed to engage every single person at our institution in a big way. Engage them in providing a patient-centered experience, patients first. So, naturally, we decided to take all 43,000 caregivers at the time offline, wouldn't you? Yeah, no. Half a day was spent meeting in small interdisciplinary groups of 6 to 8, facilitated by an employee, discussing the values of the Cleveland Clinic, the patient's first mantra, and the related service excellence behaviors. We also provided Communicate with Heart, which is a program that includes strategies and ideas around service excellence and service recovery. This was wildly successful. People would comment, I've never been able to sit at a table and talk to a physician like that before. Oh my goodness, they're human. They felt respected to be able to have taken that time out to focus on this. Furthermore, our employee engagement scores rose and our patient satisfaction rose. Because at that point, the other thing that we did at this Cleveland Clinic experience that I forgot to say, probably the biggest thing, is that we leveled the hierarchy. We made everybody a caregiver. We're all caregivers. Physicians, janitors, nurses, data techs, you name it, we're all caregivers. It would no longer be acceptable to walk by an obvious safety hazard and not take care of it, because it was all of our jobs. That was really empowering to employees at the Cleveland Clinic. So there's a video that some of you may have seen out there it came about later in the history of the clinic, but I think that it really captures the sentiments of the clinic and the caregivers very nicely. If I can get this to work. It's probably about 7 minutes, but hang in there. Oops. I couldn't get that to work. I'm close. All right. Everybody has a story, and if we don't ask, we won't know what it is. So we all felt empowered to ask. We all felt empowered to improve their experience, because you just don't know. And I don't think many of us can walk down the halls of the Cleveland Clinic the same way ever again. The other thing that it did you catch it? The comments weren't just about patients. They were about the caregivers too. It used to be that patients first meant, in our minds as clinicians, we need to leave ourselves at the door. When we go to work, we're putting patients first, so we got to take care of ourselves at home so we can be ready to go. But it's not possible. And the minute we leave ourselves at the door is the minute we start getting disingenuous and inauthentic with our patients and ourselves. So this was really a reawakening for many of us to ask people for their story and be empathic toward patients and one another. Now again, this came later, but I thought it fit here to show you. But there was a group for which Cleveland Clinic experience was less than successful. Anybody care to guess? The professional staff? The physicians? See, the Cleveland Clinic prided itself in being a physician-led organization. They provided all kinds of perks to physicians as a way of conveying value and respect to them. Closer parking, better health benefits, private dining rooms. All of this was being taken away. And so the idea that we're all caregivers felt like a pretty huge hit to physicians, or to many physicians. It almost felt as if the organization didn't really value them anymore. Leadership, by this point, understood that that was some of the undercurrent and that there were murmurs out there. And they realized we were long past due for engaging physicians in a unique way that would put them at the front line of improving patient experience. So we started by surveying the healthcare landscape. And of course, then and now, it's all about this triple aim: reduce cost, improve the patient experience, improve quality, right? And this is really a wonderful opportunity to improve. And the clinic had some areas that it stood to improve on. Inpatient satisfaction surveys were becoming transparent in healthcare. Reimbursement was getting tied to those inpatient satisfaction surveys. We stood to lose about $12 million a year because of our low physician communication scores, patient satisfaction communication scores. We were below the 7th percentile. So, seems like an obvious thing to get physicians on board and engage them in communication skills training, right? Wouldn't you like to charge that team? Mm-hmm. In 2009, Adrian Boise, a neurologist and who is now our Chief Experience Officer, was tasked with developing resources to support physicians in communication. But unfortunately, it's not that easy, as you all well know, because physicians and clinicians are under incredible pressure trying to make up for the deficiencies of our healthcare system by improving access, by improving the safety and the quality, by improving their efficiency, while doing this additional documentation. That electronic medical record doesn't complete itself, all while doing this with fewer resources. The pressure of this healthcare landscape, working in this healthcare landscape, creates all kinds of stress and job dissatisfaction. Over 50% of physicians experience professional burnout, and that stress and that distress has a very significant and negative impact on the quality of care, patients. So, Adrienne Boise convened a task force. She included physicians of many different specialties. She included physicians that were already doing some communication skills work. She included others that had no idea what it was. Kind of strong-armed them in. She included surgeons. She included education and communication types. And we all spent almost a year and a half reviewing the empirical literature, traveling, and evaluating internal and national programs, communication skills training programs, and consulting with other experts in the field and in other industries, much like you are doing now. And we got excited. We got really excited. Because what we found is relationship-centered communication has over 30 years of empirically validated research to support it. And what does it show? It shows that not only does it improve the patient experience, it improves clinical health outcomes. These skills, when used effectively, improved in randomized controlled trials, improved diabetic patients' hemoglobin A1C and cholesterol. These skills have been shown to reduce the severity and duration of the common cold. Yeah. Wonderful news. But more importantly, or I should say just as importantly, they've also been shown to improve the provider experience, to build self-efficacy, to build resiliency and wellness. So for us as clinicians, that's something that we could get behind. That's something that we were very passionate about because we're working in the trenches with our colleagues. We know how hard they're working, and we know what it's like to not be able to work as ideally as we'd like to, providing the care that we would like to for patients. What we saw was relationship-centered communication training had the power to drive the provider experience and in turn drive patient experience. So patients first does not mean providers second. So we developed a pilot course and we rolled it out in a grassroots fashion. First to colleagues and then friends of colleagues. And that initial task force made some very strategic decisions that really impacted the way that we developed the course and rolled it out. So I'd like to share with you a few of those principles now. First of all, we recognize the expertise and autonomy of physicians and clinicians. We didn't want this course to be about remediation of poor inpatient satisfaction scores. We recognized and communicated to participants that they have a degree of experience and expertise that is highly valuable. Now, it may be that they have a bit of unconscious competence. They're practicing at lightning speeds. They need to have that to be efficient. And yet we encourage them to think about becoming reflectively competent. And by providing them with a shared or common language in communication, they would be able to reflect on the skills, the communication skills that they were using and refine them, and they would also be able to better teach it to others. These skills have a lot of research behind them, as I said, and yet still we wanted to defend them because there were a lot of physicians that would come and say, I'm not going to do that. Do you know how much time that would take? Well, we just showed you a study that said it saved you 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes per patient, but yeah. We had to be very careful, right? You really needed to convey respect. So we made a pact. We weren't going to defend the skills. Let the research stand for itself, and instead, we offered them the skills as tools for their toolbox. And it would require their professional expertise and discernment to decide when to apply which tool at the right time. This engaged physicians in a big way. The second guiding principle was creating a safe, supportive space to practice the skills. We were asking physicians with 20, 30 years of experience to come in and practice foundational communication and interviewing skills with their colleagues and standardized patients. Oh, and get some feedback for it. They were highly vulnerable. And so we went out of our way to establish group guidelines, assuring confidentiality, emphasizing that it's a learning laboratory where mistakes are opportunities to learn and where there is more value placed on effort than on performance. We also provided them with a very specific format for giving and receiving feedback, starting with the learner's self-reflection of what worked effectively and what they might do differently, followed by the patient's perspective of how it felt, followed by their peers, again identifying what about the skills worked really well there. And then maybe if there's time, what they might do differently. We also, to keep it safe and supportive, created groups. We capped the classes at 12. And we created 2 groups of 6 for the smaller group practice so that it was a little more intimate. Third is relevance and utility. And as many of you know, adults prefer to learn those things that they find useful and relevant to their goals, right? They want to know that these are feasible things to implement. And so we spent the majority of time in our skills practice, deliberate skills practice with helpful feedback. And we really likened it to professional sports who, as good as they get, continue to have coaches come in and help them hone their golf swing or hone whatever skill they may want to perfect. We also really pushed ourselves to develop more innovative educational methodologies, action methods, to be able to engage staff in a full-day communication training, because that's a long day. So much like you all are sitting here, you need to do something to get them up and moving and really engaged. So can I ask you to join me in an experience right now to see what it was like? A lot of the action methods come from the world of improv and sociodrama. So many of you may already know this exercise, but if you would, turn to the person on your right, and if there's no one on your right, look to the person right behind you. Once you have a pair, I'm going to give you some directions. This tends to get people talking, but I'm going to ask for your attention. I'm going to ask for your attention. For the sake of time, with a group this large, I'm going to ask you to only talk at the times that I ask you to talk, and then look back here so that we can move through this. But I think it'll be a good opportunity for you to experience it. So now you've paired up with someone on your right, hopefully. Each person, I'd like one person to raise your hand in that pairing. Okay? All right, no talking yet. The person that raised your hand, you're going to start the conversation first. Okay? And what you're going to talk about is your favorite dessert. Now, before you get started, here are the rules. You're going to say a sentence about your favorite dessert, and then the other person is going to say a sentence about in response to what you said. But you have to preface it with yes, but. So the person that raised their hand is going to say something about their favorite dessert, and then the other person's going to say yes, but, blah, 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 and then the other person's going to say yes, but, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go like that for just 30 seconds or so. Go ahead and begin, and when I tell you to stop, please look this way. Okay. I'm going to cut you short. I think you're getting the picture. All right. I'm going to ask you. Time out. Oh, Jeff, you're a good whistler. All right, time out. You're having too much fun with this already. That's good. Now, this is going to be even shorter, so don't take too long. But the person that spoke first, you're going to go second now. And the other person is going to speak first about sports. This time, however, each response thereafter is going to be prefaced with the word no. We're not going long, so listen for my timeout, okay? Go ahead and begin. All right, time out. I like to cut this one short because I don't want you going to blows over your favorite sports team. All right, one last one. This time, the person that went first is going to start again, and I'd like you to talk about your favorite vacation spot. And you're going to preface each statement afterwards with yes and. Go ahead and begin. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Time out. Time out. Normally, we would then debrief that process and get your insights on what that experience was like. And I would ask you, which one was easier? Some people would say something different than what most people will say. For the sake of time, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. Most people end up saying they preferred the yes and, that they found that it actually allowed them to go somewhere. And at that point, we would then also add to physicians that patients, when they are in a contemplative mindset for changing behavior, often use yes but. And physicians, when they are in a resistant frame of mind, like, no, I'm not going to give you narcotics, say, yes, but. That 1 5-minute exercise is very quick at conveying how important our language is and how mindful we need to be about all of the words that we use. And the idea is that by sharing yes and, yes and, yes and, you're actually creating a shared story. It's not the patients, it's not the physicians, it's a shared story. It's relational. You're co-producers, much like you are with your students. So that's just an example of some of the ways that we try to engage physicians, and that also leads to the last guiding principle of this curriculum, and that is we wanted to make it fun and relational. It was really important to us that we provided physicians with an enjoyable day. We didn't see ourselves as just providing knowledge and skills. We were creating an experience. We were providing them with an experience, and we wanted them to walk out of that course feeling rejuvenated and having 1 or 2 skills or tools that they were going to try out in their clinic. The biggest way that we did this was by modeling the very skills that we were teaching. We modeled them through and through. So at this point, we'd also trained. The other thing that we did is we were very mindful to keep it peer-to-peer. We'd had probably 30 different communications courses at the Cleveland Clinic, and probably less than 1% of our physicians ever attended those courses. They were great. Those that didn't find them to be useful, relevant, or feasible to implement in their practice. So it was very important from our perspective that to get buy-in, we were going to have physicians teaching the course. So we needed to put physicians through some intensive facilitation training. Right around this time, we'd gotten through about 700 people in our course, and there was some really good buzz. And naturally, Dr. Cosgrove thought, well, this is so great, we're going to have to mandate it for all the physicians at the institution and all the clinical trainees, and the advanced care providers. So all of a sudden, people that were coming because they wanted to were kind of being mandated to come. And we thought, oh no. And yet, even then, people were coming to the course saying, after 20 years, what do you have to teach me about communication? And they're leaving saying, wow, this was really different. This was helpful. So, the other thing that we did, though, at this point is to really step back and reflect on what we were seeing in the courses. Because, yes, people were practicing the skills, they seemed to be acquiring them, they seemed to be integrating them into their clinical practice. But it was very clear that one thing was missing. Physicians just didn't seem to intuit forming a relationship with patients as their job. It just wasn't part of their role. They couldn't grasp it. And yet, interestingly, we were modeling all the skills that we were teaching to them, and we were blown away by the relationships and the new communities that were forming that had never been there before. And at that point, we realized that we needed to create a new model of communication, one that would bring relationship to the forefront and really leverage it as a therapeutic or a healing agent of change. And that's what brought us to the READY model. The READY model is really 3 distinct phases of relationship. So instead of a one and done where a physician can say, oh, I checked, I established rapport with my patient, check. They needed to be thinking about the relationship throughout the entire visit or throughout whatever amount of time they had with someone. It was important to think about establishing trust in the first phase, eliciting the patient's perspective, and conveying to patients that we heard and understood them in the second phase, and then empowering them and inspiring them to engage and partner in their own care. And as you see, empathy ran throughout. This is just highlighting some of the specific skills that we taught because we integrated all of that 30 years of empirically validated research into this model. All right, then by April of 2014, we'd put about 97% of our physicians through the course, 94% of our house trainees, many of our advanced care providers. We had a team of 60 clinician facilitators. We were providing advanced topics courses on delivering bad news, on talking with patients who have chronic pain. We had integrated it into the medical school so that every level of learner was speaking the same language based on the READY model and relationship-centered communication. And we were including it in onboarding of all new staff. We'd also created this Center for Excellence in Healthcare Communication that went far beyond resources for physician communication and more into facilitation and a focus on research, peer coaching, and consultation. Just to give you a little bit of the evidence, and then we'll wrap and take some questions. We took a convenience sample of 897 that went through in a period of 4 months. The majority were male, Caucasian practitioners, non-surgical practitioners, with about 16 years of experience. As you can see here, when they came, I'm sorry, I should explain, we gave them pre-surveys, post-surveys at the end of the 8-hour course, and then again, 3-month surveys. We assessed their confidence in using particular skills, their knowledge, attitudes, and experience of the day. And we also gave them 2 objective measures, the Jefferson Empathy Scale and the Maslach Burnout Inventory. As you can see here, they were not expecting a good day, right? So much for that good buzz. But over 50% by the end of the day strongly agreed that this was a valuable use of their time, relevant, and they could see how the skills would be feasibly implemented. Similarly, they reported enhanced knowledge, changed attitudes, and enhanced skills. They also reported clinically significant changes in their confidence in using the actual skills. And this is really important because research shows that the more confident someone is in their capacity to communicate with these skills, the more likely they are to actually use them with their patients. Common challenges that physicians face often center around time management and intense patient emotion. And as you can see, this course also greatly improved their confidence in those two domains. Now, what about what patients thought? Did this have any impact on patient experience, truly? Well, we looked at outpatient satisfaction scores 6 months before and 6 months after the course. And what we found is 6 out of the 7 domains of physician communication were significantly improved. I'll tell you, the changes look very small, but they are very meaningful and result in a lot of money in reimbursement as a result of having improved our scores. The one that was not clinically significant was respect, and it was already high, so we're suspecting we had a bit of a ceiling effect there because it was trending in the right direction. What about on the inpatient side? We put people through a little too quickly to have a randomized control trial, so we're working on putting one of those together now. But what we can tell you is that before the course rollout, people were below the 7th percentile nationally on patient satisfaction of physician communication, and after the course, they were above the 70th percentile, and they're holding. Clinicians were very satisfied with the safety of the environment, with the educational methodologies used, and would recommend it to their friends or colleagues. We also found significant improvements in empathy and professional burnout. And we'll be publishing some of those results shortly on our entire group. I think just as importantly, some of the qualitative comments and anecdotes that we got those are what really mattered to us, those of us facilitating the course. Reminds me of why I became a doctor in the first place. I thought being an empathic sort, and through thorough in history taking over 25 years, I'd have little to learn. I was wrong. Your course brings up some very useful ideas. This has been so far one of the best things in my career that I have done. Thank you for all you've done for me. I'm a better doctor because of your efforts. This is what keeps us going in this work. And the training experience you created transcends any prior work in communication, and I'm so grateful to have participated. The relationships and development of community among all of us cannot be overstated. Powerful, right? So from there, we're very much a work in progress. The title of this talk should have probably been Lessons Learned and Learning. And I was telling Jeff that the minute we stop learning and think we've arrived in terms of patient experience, we need to close our doors because there's always something new to learn. Just a few, oh, you can't even see it, but there are some lessons learned. Maybe I can come over and read it some of them for you. Is it on? Yeah. So I totally did not follow that 5-bullet rule here. But some lessons learned. The pursuit of the human dimension of medicine, relationships and compassion should be pursued as rigorously as technical expertise and excellence. Improving the patient experience is a continuous process that requires top-down ownership and messaging, ample resources, and reflective practice. Aligning care around the patient optimizes teamwork, collaboration, shared knowledge, and resources, all while improving the patient experience and engagement. Defining patient experience is vital for meaningful execution of improvements that do not sacrifice any element. We want safety, quality, high value, and engagement. And everyone needs to be accountable for the patient experience. We are all caregivers. Finding ways to engage all stakeholders in a way that validates their value in the organization is critical to your success. And last, focusing on clinician experience through relationship-centered communication training that honors their expertise can enhance empathy and resiliency and subsequently drive patient experience. So I really want to thank you for this time, and I think I'll hand it over to Jeff for some questions.
Okay, thank you, Amy. So just for format, I have a couple of questions. I guess I'll take advantage of my privileged position to ask those too. But your job is to start thinking of questions for Amy for this session. I think we're wrapping up at about 3 o'clock, so we've got a little bit of time. But so the first one I'm very curious about, Amy, and it has a lot to do with maybe some important differences between your organization and ours. What responsibility do patients have in this equation, this relationship-centered approach? Which I think is certainly, for us here in higher ed, we feel that our students have increasing amounts of responsibility as they move through the organization, wherever they start.
Well, we know from the research that the more engaged patients are, and the more they own their health and serve as the head of their treatment team, the more effective the outcomes. We also know that not all patients want to be the head of their treatment team. They prefer the more traditional view. So we need to somehow try to balance that. I think it's really important, though, to note that it isn't like exchange theory where it's, kind of, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine, because patients don't want to come see us. They're sick. And they would like nothing better than to just be healthy and not have to ever enter the doors of our hospital. And so they're in a very vulnerable position and feel very powerless. So what is their responsibility? I think it's just to be willing to establish a relationship with us, to be willing to trust, to be willing to share their perspectives, and to partner with us. I think that it really is important, though, that we realize that we can either help them accomplish that or not. So oftentimes physicians will say, well, I tried to set them up, I told them what to do, and they just didn't do it. Had we really taken the time to get to know them, though, and understand what their perspective is or what their preferences are, we might have found out they don't have health insurance and can't afford the $1,000 a month medicine. So it really is important that we recognize the need on our side to set them up for success. So yes, patients have a responsibility to be engaged, and the more they are, the better off they'll be. I think we have a responsibility to make that seamless for them.
Great. And just one more question for me, and then I'm going to look to the audience. So I would imagine that as you got involved in the early culture change, you were dealing with a lot of mind changing or a lot of persuasion work. But as you picked up steam, you might then start attracting new people to Cleveland Clinic because of this emerging brand or this emerging focus on the patient experience. How have the hiring practices at Cleveland Clinic evolved over time, and how is your team shaping what's happening in human resources and the onboarding process now?
That's a great question, and I'm going to tell you, I think that is definitely a work in progress. We do not have that all figured out. We have a very huge talent management arm, and we have what used to be called the Office of Learning and Professional Development and Human Resources, and then the Cleveland Clinic Learning Academy, all of these different pieces and parts that weren't necessarily working together. But at the end of the day, it's really important for us to focus in on hiring the right type of person, the person that's going to be already somewhat supportive of and looking for a patient's first culture. We need to be willing to let go of those that don't. because we know not everybody should be working in healthcare, and I'm sure that fits in education too. No. But I think it's really important that now in our Center for Excellence in Healthcare Communication, which is primarily clinician-based, we are now working with all of these different pieces and parts to really try to come together and have more of a synergistic flow, and to really be able to better collaborate and share resources in that area. So I think right now there's a lot of hiring practices that are separate from professional growth and learning development practices and so on.
Thank you. Okay, so here's the microphone. You know how this works. Go ahead and line up. And I think we are both experienced educators, so we will sit here until somebody asks a question. Oh, and please introduce yourself and how you fit into the organization.
Hi there, I'm Gihan Fernando. I'm the Executive Director of the Career Center at AU. Thank you so much, first of all, for your talk. There are so many touch points that are analogous, where we can find similarities. I wanted to ask a little bit, you've already shared in some depth sort of the process that you went through to implement a significant cultural change. What were the pieces that didn't work so well, and how did you retool as you went to figure those out? And a little bit more specifically, I wanted to ask about, you talked a lot about the patient and putting the patient first. What about patients' families? Because we have that analogy here too.
Oh, that's a beautiful question. So some of the challenges that we have experienced that I would encourage you all, if you at all possible, avoid, would be probably the biggest one is that we didn't or could have engaged our physicians in a more significant way earlier on and really gotten the messaging out to them why these things were happening and why they were so important. And I think not just messaging it, but doing it in an empathic way so that they didn't just, because honestly, I'm sure, and I know leadership messaged it, but it wasn't heard in a way that felt like we're in this together and we're going to work through this and we've got to overcome something. Instead, it was messaged in a way that made us feel, here comes another thing. But that's on the heels of already being told there's this other thing we have to think about, and you reach that bar and then they move the bar and you got to reach this bar. I mean, we're constantly being asked to do it better. And so it didn't feel any different to us. And we ran the risk of thinking of it as a one and done or a flavor of the day. So the more you can engage your all of your stakeholders, the better. And the other point about, and I can speak more about challenges, but the other point that you had about families I think is really good. And again, is another one that we're still working on. You know, we have advanced topic courses on how to hold family meetings, how to involve family, and we are definitely including family in conversations, advisory councils, focus groups. But probably the biggest area that highlights we have not gotten it right yet has to do with end-of-life care. It is very hard at that point in someone's life to get death and dying right. But that can be a very beautiful, natural process. And we're really using that and hoping that will be a platform to further drive our relationship and understanding of families.
Hi, my name is Karen Gladbach, and I'm an AU alum, so I have a special place in my heart for AU. I also have a special place in my heart for Cleveland Clinic, both literally and figuratively and literally, because last year I was one of the 5.9 million patients at Cleveland Clinic for open heart surgery. I had a mitral valve repair with Dr. Lytle. And it was an incredible experience, so thank you. That's my first comment, to say thank you. It was really, I call it my spa experience. I mean, I had Reiki, I had Reiki, I had aromatherapy, foot massage. A lot of this was also available to my family. My husband's over here and some of my friends who are part of my support team, so they really didn't consider the family. I mean, when I went into surgery, the family went into the orientation. They gave my husband the beeper so that he could call in anytime. They gave him the telephone number into the surgery room in case he wanted to call at any point during the surgery. They also contacted a woman who was a nurse, was also part of the pastoral care, I believe, or spiritual care. She came with me and she held my hand, took me into the surgery room and was with me until I went out. And then afterwards, the bill, I got one bill. Everything came in one envelope. It wasn't continual bills. Yes.
That even seems too good to be true for me. That's wonderful.
So I have only the best to say about the Cleveland Clinic. The one question I have is, before I went there, and then even afterwards, before I wanted to talk to people that had gone through what I'd gone through. So I found people through friends, and a couple of them had gone to the Cleveland Clinic. But that would have been something like, as a patient, a former patient, I would be very happy to talk to people who are about to go through this experience. And then afterwards, that was the thing, I came back here to DC and I felt a little bit alone, to be quite honest, because there was nobody from Cleveland Clinic, although my clinicians here had been trained at Cleveland Clinic. But anyway, I just want to say thank you. It was an incredible experience. And I read The Cleveland Clinic Way by Dr. Cosgrove. So I think the book was really told the whole story as well as yours.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the Cleveland Clinic Leading the Way and Jim Merlino's book, Service Fanatics, I think are both good reads for really talking about this change in culture. I want to congratulate you on having a smooth and safe surgery. I'm glad it was a wonderful experience, and I appreciate your sharing with me ideas of how we can do it even better. It's interesting because there are some segments, and I'm sure you have this too, where in one area we have that kind of program set up. We have in the cancer arena, we have something called I think it's an angel program of sorts established by Scott Hamilton. And we need to take some of those best practices and really be able to integrate them throughout the organization. And that's where, I'll be taking that one right back, but that's where having an Office of Patient Experience is so important, because constantly we'll be hearing those kinds of ideas, and you need a place that's going to fit it all in somewhere and make it happen, execute on it.
Lynn Stallings, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies. I really enjoyed the video, and I was thinking about the slogan, "We're all caregivers." And I began to extrapolate to our scenario here and thought we're all educators. And then immediately I thought students could be included in that pool, and I wondered about your patients. Had any thought been given about patients having a moment in which they can be taught about communication? Because I do know under the stress of getting bad news or just coming in for a routine appointment, sometimes patients need to be educated on how to communicate, advocate in their best interest. And had there been any discussion about that?
Absolutely. We have a huge initiative on patient engagement. A lot of people in other institutions will call it patient activation, and we try to avoid that term because it's not like we want to push a button and turn you on or off. Rather, it's really about educating on, as you said, how you can advocate for yourself. And we're really exploring all the different ways that we can implement that on a broader scale.
Hey, thank you very much. Jeremy Lowe with the Office of Admissions. And healthcare and education are both continuously in the public spotlight. For us, cost is a big factor. And it can be very easy to focus on the quantitative outcomes of improving things like retention rate or the number of students who get jobs right out of college. But I think there's a level of importance to the qualitative aspects of how you, and it can be hard to forget the qualitative aspects of those changes. Can you speak to, it sounds like a lot of what the Cleveland Clinic did was focused on the qualitative aspects of patient care, and that in turn improved a lot of the quantitative metrics that you've cited. Can you speak more to the importance and again, how Cleveland Clinic went about its philosophy of focusing on qualitative measures?
Well, I think that you're hearing my lack of expertise in the data world as opposed to probably how the Cleveland Clinic went about it. So I apologize for that. And we did do a lot of qualitative work. We did do a number of focus groups to assess different stakeholders, from patients and families to physicians and specifically surgeons, because they seem to be a group all their own. You know, we also have patient advisory councils where, in an ongoing way, people who have been or are patients sit on those and continue to provide information to us. And there are also always opportunities for patients on those satisfaction surveys to provide verbatim comments. And those are circulated throughout our institution broadly. Now, of course, they're also circulated online. So the other thing that recently happened, or in the last year, in addition to making all of the inpatient satisfaction scores transparent, you can go online to, I'm going to blank on the sites, but there's a number of different sites, internet sites, that will let you rate a provider. Oftentimes, there is a certain type of person that goes on and shares their information there. And there aren't always that many of them. But we do know that patients are looking at that information and using it to guide their decisions about where to go for care. And so, what we have done is we have our own website now that also has a star system based on these inpatient satisfaction surveys. Because our physicians, we're getting far more satisfaction surveys, so the numbers are better. It's more of a random sample, and it's a fairer assessment of what they're really doing. At the same time, should those comments not be all that great, I can tell you as a clinician, you better believe I'm going to be working on that, because that's my reputation out there. And while there are days where, I just run out of time and I feel like I'm out of steam and I have nothing more to give, it's not okay. This is my job, and it is to care for patients, and that's really what I want to be doing. And I just need to be reminded of that. So sometimes those scores can actually, and that transparency can actually be very helpful. So physicians originally did not see our STAR system as being a very positive thing. We've had to really work hard at messaging why that is in their best interest, because those health grades and other internet sites are not going away. Yeah.
Hi, John Hyman from the College Writing Program in the College of Arts and Sciences. Thanks for this. Thanks very much. I think that one way the analog between our two institutions makes sense is that we are often duty-bound to give bad news. Now, the stakes are higher, perhaps, in your field. I think we were probably all chilled at several times, even in the video, when a tumor was malignant or some such. But we have to give bad news too. It may be a failed project, a failed course. It might even be a recommendation that a student leave American University. So is there specific guidance in your teaching of your colleagues toward how to communicate news that nobody wants to hear?
Absolutely. That is one of our more sought-after advanced topic courses. We wanted to make sure that all of the providers had the same foundational communication skills. After that, I don't usually talk this much. I'm a psychologist. Listening is my expertise. Sorry.
How do you feel about that?
Well, my mother told me there'd be days like these. No. Where was I? Bad news, yes. So, we have courses on how to deliver bad news, how to deliver unexpected news, because sometimes it's not bad, but it wasn't what you expected. Congratulations, you're pregnant. You may not have planned that. So there are frameworks for that out there, and it is something that is well sought after, but we did want to give them foundational skills first, because those foundational skills just get applied in a more nuanced way for these advanced topics. So they're not having to start from scratch. They're building on a foundation of information here. And our hope is that over time, in these annual performance reviews, that there will be an expectation that everyone obtain a certain number of continuing education in the area of communication skills training. It is that vital in the health and wellness of our patients and our employees, for that matter. And I would argue that the bad news you have to share is devastating. I mean, yes, you're not talking about death and dying, but for that developmental age and stage of life, that is devastating. And so I actually appreciate the seriousness with which you consider that.
Thank you. My name is Helen Dodson. I'm the Director of Communications for the College of Arts and Sciences.
How about that?
My question is really looking toward the future. You referred a few times to the changing landscape, the fiscal landscape of healthcare. Specifically, I want to ask you about the changes of coming and already existing with regard to Medicare. So I imagine a significant number of your patients are covered by Medicare. This may be a college campus, but there's, I'm sure, a few people in this room covered under Medicare, and the rest of us are just praying it's still there when we need it. How have you been thinking about or planning for the changes, or will there be changes in your approach with the post-acute care changes, that requirements that are going to be imposed on hospital, the proposals for bundling of services? I mean, I'm sure that's going to have a significant impact, not just on you, but on all hospitals and other kinds of healthcare providers.
I am so grateful for our leadership, and to be able to say that's above my pay grade, because that is an extremely challenging question that they have been aware of and facing for a while now. And so I do know that they're working on all kinds of different aspects. But at the end of the day, in terms of the patient experience, our thought is, in many ways, it doesn't matter what the cost is. It's about doing the right thing. In fact, I remember early on we were having these task force meetings, and the task force members were arguing back and forth about how are we going to ever afford this? And, you know, we can't take people offline for 8 hours of training. And, well, the party got crashed by our chief of staff and chief experience officer at the time, and they just halted it right there. And they said, you know what? This isn't about the money. This is about caring for the patient, and here we are going to do the right thing. You know, I think that we are constantly battling between doing the right thing and recognizing the amount of resources that requires, and also that saves us with the state of healthcare today. I would love to hear some of those answers, and I wish I could give them, but I don't have them. Although I wish there is an article on for delivering bad news, and it's a highly effective way to deliver it. Instead of saying, I'm sorry to have to tell you, you say, I wish you didn't have to go through that right now.
Hi, I'm Karen Frostley-Jones in Institutional Research and Assessment, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit as to how you train your employees to communicate with one another, and the ways in which you try and enhance. I would assume that in a situation where you have physicians in a very hierarchical system, that there's the potential for there to be some challenges with communication and respect, and also because things can go wrong, there's always the potential for finger pointing and so on. So how do you train folks to not only have empathy for their patients, but empathy for one another?
I think that's beautiful. And in large part, this training did just that for physicians, because as facilitators, we were modeling those skills and demonstrating empathy, and we were able to show them, hey, you're experiencing what your patients can experience, what your colleagues can experience. And we made it very clear that these skills are not just for the patient-provider relationship. They are for the colleague-to-colleague relationships, which we very much need to work on. They are also really good for child-parent relationships. So if you want to practice, go home, try them out on your kids. They work. They even got one of our physicians out of a couple speeding tickets. You know, I don't recommend trying that. At the same time, we do need to really focus on teaching empathy. One of the ways that we have gone about that, and I know that Indiana University School of Medicine has gone about it, is to bring in top leadership, our CEO or our Chief Experience Officer or others in the organization, and ask them to share what it is like for them to be a patient at our institution. Thinking of yourself as a patient, a lot of things become much clearer. Now, we can't always think about ourselves as patients because we have these other hats, and it actually blinds us to certain things that other people who aren't in medicine, they don't see. But it can be a very powerful way to reawaken empathy. And you all have been students at one time or another. If not lifelong learners, right? You know, the other thing you were asking, or we were talking about, was the international reach that we have. And I wonder if we should share that.
You mentioned that you're now in different cultures and different places around the world.
So one of the things that Cleveland Clinic has had the opportunity to do is develop hospitals in other areas. In the United Arab Emirates in particular, we were asked to develop a Cleveland Clinic hospital there with the exact same culture and focus on patient experience that we have here. So it's been a tremendous opportunity for us to learn more about understanding others' differences and understanding how we're a lot more similar than we are different, and really teasing that out. So we had the opportunity to go over there this past spring, and I went with a general surgeon colleague of mine who also facilitates the Train the Trainer to teach 9 physicians there from all over the world, actually, how to facilitate the Ready to Communicate course. And it was just, I think it's also a really great opportunity for relationships on a different level. We have a lot of power in our relationships to not just heal individual patients, but to heal communities, to heal, the tragedies that are going on in this day and age. And so, I think in the Cleveland Clinic, we like to think big. And I think that that is really important for inspiration and passion.
Great. So I think that's a natural place to stop. So thank you, Amy, very much for being
Thank
here.
you for having me.
So,
You guys have been great. Sorry, sir, no more time.
Before Scott jumps in there, I just want to provide a little commercial about a few people that have made today possible. So Peter and Fonta and Sharon, just wave your hands. These are the chairs of the task force. My partners in crime on the Expert Identification Subcommittee, so Kamalika, Chris, Greg, Nancy, Sonia, wave and say, our Master of Logistics and All Project Management, Bridget Cooney, right here. And a number of people that make the behind-the-scenes magic happen. So Laura Columbi in my office, Lisa Arakaki, and Denise Wilkerson in the Provost office. And then before Scott mentions anything, I don't want to forget, because we have a bag of stuff for you. It's a bag of AU stuff. And Amy did promise at lunch that she was sending both of her children to AU in about 10 years.
They're 9 and 12, so.
I've got a lot of great stuff in here, including an American University hoodie.
I love it.
So, right?
Thank you so much.
So thank you.
That's very kind of you.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for taking the time. As you hear, it takes quite a bit of time and energy to move an institution that really looks at the total experience of our students. And we are committed to this concept of a great experience for our students. All of you are involved in the educational process. I want to thank the Cleveland Clinic. I want to thank you, Amy, and Jeff, and the committee who made this all possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you.